Thank you, everybody, for taking time to join us today. My name is Sharon Bendev. I am the Content Marketing Manager here at TRG Screen. And I just want to go over a few simple housekeeping items before we start. First, you probably saw or heard that the session is being recorded. So afterward, we can send a recording to everyone who registered so you can replay that at your convenience. Also, you'll notice on your screen, there's a Q&A function in the webinar controls. We certainly encourage you to ask any questions. We want this to be interactive. And if for any reason we run out of time to get to your question, we will follow up and be sure to answer all the questions that came in. Also, during the webinar, we will do two live polls. So please do weigh in. Your peers love seeing your take on those polls. Are certainly helpful to us in terms of tailoring content. And your answers are anonymous, but they kind of give a sense of what is going on with currents within the group. And then lastly, at the end, there will be a survey. So if you could just take a moment and tell us what you think about the webinar, that helps us improve webinars in the future. So it's my pleasure today to introduce our speakers today. You may know one or both of them. We have Trip Wadley, Head of Strategic Relationships, and also Deepak Rajagopal, Global Head of Managed Services. And I think this will be a really fun conversation. They are two of our most in-demand expert speakers. And plus, this particular topic is a conversation they have been having around the world in Asia, in Singapore, in India, in Europe, and in the US. And it's definitely struck a chord with folks. So we hope it will with you as well. So with that, Trip and Deepak, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Shay.
Thanks, Shay. Appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us today for what looks like a fireside chat, right, Trip, in terms of kind of opening our hearts and minds out to the world of what we are seeing and what we are witnessing with our customers in the market data space. So anything you want to add before we get into the topic?
Yeah, as someone who's run market data administration teams, a lot of these topics resonate very closely to me, and also in the many client conversations I've had over the last 8 years at TRG Screen. We've had a lot of clients do this journey, and it's helped them quite a bit. So again, it's near and dear to my heart, and I think it's just a natural part of the natural progression that we're seeing. So yeah, back to you, Deepak.
Thank you, Trip. And that I think is a great place for us to start, right? Because you've been doing this for God knows how long, but for quite a long time.
3 years,
right?
I just graduated from college, right? Like
yeah, for a long time, right? So given what we see today, in terms of reflecting on your job as the head of marketing, right? What are the things that you see have changed today as market data leaders in terms of what their bosses are expecting of them? Perhaps I think that's a great place for us to start and set the stage as to why this topic and why we are doing this. You agree?
I do, and what the T-shirt says is "do more with less," right? It's a constant theme. We hear it all the time, and we, everyone is resource constrained, and the volumes are not letting up. Firms are growing, the data demands are bigger. The train keeps rolling down the tracks, and the headcount is not necessarily coming, right? And so there's lots of different ways to deal with it, but certainly, that T-shirt says "do more with less," and that's not changing.
True, and that's exactly what we are hearing from everyone we speak to, whether customers or prospects in the market data space. Is like, the pressures of increased volume of activity, the increased velocity in which the banks and financial institutions are reacting to market conditions, and the increased focus on demonstrating the value for the business data spend or the market data spend that each of the institutions are spending on. is something that we see as the key drivers to demonstrating value. So why are we talking about this? Right? Is because what we see in market data space today is, apart from industry challenges, there is and the need to demonstrate value for the spend that every financial institution is going through. There is we would call it as the value continuum, right? Is bear with us on this because it's a simple subject, but has to be delivered in the right way so that we are able to convey the message, right? So what we see here is what the market data managers and the leaders are doing today is spending inordinate amounts of time in this quadrant where they are spending time working on commercial administration activities, such as processing your invoices, making sure your inventory is up to date, fulfilling orders. By doing the commercial administration activity yourselves, you do not have the capacity and the ability to focus on what your organization is expecting out of you, which is focused on the value added tasks, right? So there is a constant battle between how do I spend the time between what I have to do today to stay on top of commercial data administration activities so that I have to find time to go and prove to my boss or to my senior management as to why we are spending so much time today or so much money today on a specific data feed or specific business or so on and so forth. I want to pause here to see what your take is, Trip, on this particular point that I just made.
Yes, and I would also say that as teams evolve along this continuum, right, they get better at what they do. Well, no good deed goes unpunished. So as they get better and more efficient, more volume comes. So if they're not prepared to take those volumes, meaning a broader definition of what market data and research mean, all of a sudden trading apps, which might not have been market data, are in the mix. Or your team was market data and now they're doing more IT software, and so there's more vendors just in the market data space and research space alone. But as the definitions expand, you get asked to do more, and you're going to get stuck if change isn't made, right? So and interesting, we see our clients all along the spectrum, right? So which is exciting for us. We'd like to see them move from left to right.
Just staying on this particular subject. So let's think about this situation, right? So when you were the head of market data, if you had the ability to get rid of the commercial administration activities, what would that mean to you?
Well, what it means is having your team spend less time doing administrative functions. I want the team to be as effective as possible. I have, as that head, right, you have to have your team laser focused on the vendor relationships, right, first. Because those renewals are going to always keep coming. There's always a demand for new sources and services, and you have to have your A game when it comes to negotiation, right? So in addition to that, you need to have outstanding relationships with your business lines, right? As most of the folks on this call know, right? In order to ensure that you are maximizing the value of that vendor interaction, right? So who needs what, how much the thing's going to cost, get the requirements, making sure that you're only contracting for the requirements you need, making sure usage is in the mix and all those kinds of things, right? There's no time, and yes, of course you need inventory. Of course you need to be able to manage your invoice process, and it needs to be very effective and accurate, or else you're not going to have the data you need to go to battle, with the vendors, right? So, or battle with your business lines, hopefully not a battle, right? But so the data is really important, but you don't have to, if you're spending all your time managing that data, doing manual entry, you're not going to be an effective negotiator. You're not going to be an effective partner in the business lines.
That makes complete sense, right? And I'm keen to, as you would do, I'm also keen to hear what our audience think and people who have taken time to attend our webinar thing. So Shay, would you mind running that quick poll for us, please? Thank you.
And I'll cue the Jeopardy music.
Yeah. We thought we'll give it a quick minute while you guys respond to it, and And then Shay, probably you can at the appropriate time announce what we felt, what our audience felt about what the top three things are, and that's driving them away from delivering value for their business. Shay, do you have the results in now?
Maybe we'll give a minute, right? I want to vote, but they won't let me.
Yeah, me too.
And you know, hopefully not everyone's checking every box. That's top three, right? So, see if the tech works. I love it. Oh,
Fantastic trip. That's very interesting, and I'm pretty impressed. Wanted to get your take on what you see and how you're interpreting.
it's not surprising, actually, you know, seeing invoice processing and inventory management at the top. But you know, it also does speak to other work. I mean, we threw some things out here that are interesting to, you know, TRG, but not surprising. Hey, Shay, is there a way to refresh it to get higher than 10? Maybe not. If not, you know, I think these results are good enough.
Yeah, unfortunately, no Trip, because I paused it, but hopefully it's pretty indicative and not surprising, right?
No, not surprising, and I think this is definitely indicative and consistent with what we see as well. Sometimes, you know, I think if we had bigger numbers, I would see more request management too, because we're starting to see that as well. Because it's not just an order to get, it's a thing, right? You know, please get, you know, NYSE level 2 on my Bloomberg terminal, as opposed to so who's selling titanium research on titanium airplane wing bolts or something like that, and those kinds of things will come into a market data research team or an equity library, things like that. So those they all matter, right? They all take time out. Some of these things are even higher value than others. But with invoice processing, inventory management, and I even say, you know, in that administration renewal management space, there's a lot of room to automate and you know, and you know, get a service for some of those tasks, because they're not going to add value to they're going to add only data to your renewal and business line interaction process. And it does these kinds of things will allow you to progress along the continuum.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Trip, because when I looked at it, first two things that popped out for me is the invoice processing and inventory management, which is pretty much what we think as an organization are the low-hanging fruits that we can touch upon, either as a DIY or look at a provider who's got the service who can do this for you. But I think if you're able to find a way to unlock capacity out of your invoice processing and retrieval in your inventory management activity, that I think would unlock at least 30 to 40% of your operational capacity to go and focus on the rest of the stuff, right? See, order fulfillment and request management is great, but I'm saying there's a meaty chunk of your time that's going towards invoice processing and inventory management.
Yeah, sorry, and I'd like to actually say that inventory management, you know, there's a whole order fulfillment part that comes with inventory management where that takes a lot of time, and I would consider that as part of this. It's not just uploading the files from the vendors and things like you know, SID reports and things like that. It also has to do with that demand management process, which takes a lot of time, but that's not as long as the approval chain is there and everything is kind of ticked and tied, it's really a lot of chasing with vendors and a lot of kind of ticky-tacky work that while very important and you need to be very responsive to it and accurate, it's not going to help you be strategic. It is still tactical work. Sorry, Deepak.
Yeah. And Deepak too, I think this is consistent with results you've seen and heard worldwide too, right? So I'll stop sharing and let you go ahead with your slides.
Thanks, Shay.
Thank you so much. Excellent. And I think, yes, this is pretty consistent with what we are hearing across the different regions globally as we embark on this conversation with our customers. So here is the thing. Right? So we all understand the challenges, the problems, and we all have a sense of what utopia looks like for us, where we want to be. We know what we want to offload to create the capacity to be more valuable or value creators to our businesses. Right? So what we want to do in the next half of the conversation is talk about what is the art of possible in a more consultative way in terms of how our thinking is towards uh, driving innovation and modernization within the status quo from a market data perspective, right? So first and foremost, we all agree repetitive, manual, low-yielding task. Let's figure out a way to get rid of it. Think about it from a holistic picture of what's the total cost of ownership operating your market data program. Where is it that I'm going to make the biggest dent in terms of reducing the total cost of ownership by using it? The third thing is think a bit more holistically around, is this something that we want to do it in-house, or could we benefit from a partner who's got scaled expertise and who's got the time to value now, time to realize value now, who can do it for us? And whichever way you go, also give consideration to advancements in technology such as AI, right? In TRG screen, we are using AI to process invoices. We are using AI to read contracts. We are using AI to curate information um, from data notifications, right? So there is use case to it with the right supervision, with the right human intelligence, and with the right expertise fed into AI. We are already seeing it provide benefits for us and our customers. Let me quickly move on to the next slide. And what it then does is, where do I start, right? We know all of these things. So the way we thought about this is, when we look at market data operations, specifically around commercial administration activities, around the market data administration or market data administration activities, we like to look at it from the point of view of, okay, where is the start point and where is the end point and what's the value chain? What you see here from left to right is how we see the commercial administration of market data play out, right? So starting with category management, flowing into order fulfillment, flowing into sourcing and contracting, followed by inventory management and invoice processing and books and records, right? At TRG screen, we have a variety of solutions that cater to specific requirements within the market data administration value chain, with the exception of sourcing and contracting, which we as an organization felt with the tools like Coupa and Ariba and vendor sourcing functions within the organization is best left retained as a retained function within our customer and financial services organization. With the exception of sourcing and contracting, we've got ability to support all of these things, and we do support all of these things in varying degrees of magnitude from a support perspective for several of our customers globally. So what we then did was, if we have the value chain that runs from left to right, what is the most important thing that has low-hanging, highly repetitive, low complexity that we can first automate, right? Which is where we started off with the invoice processing, right? If you were to do it, our recommendation is please start looking at invoice processing as a function or as a value chain that you can drive automation through simple Python scripts and exponential AI. That in and of itself could be a low-hanging fruit for you to unlock. Where do I go next? The next space for you to look at is inventory management. Right? Specifically, all of these structural data flows, usage of that are pretty low complex, but periodic activity that you have to do. Contract renewals and updates, I'll just pause it for 2 minutes while I just address the first two. Those are low-hanging areas that you can start looking at. From a renewal point of view, our suggestion is that renewal workflow is something that is complex in the sense that you have to feed in a lot of parameters, a lot of permutation combination that you need to do, and there is a lot of people that needs to be notified, involved, communicated to on a periodic basis as to how the renewal flows. If you keep the renewal aside, once you have the renewal and once you get the contract, the updation of the contract in and of itself is a very simplistic activity, and it's a one-time activity that can be done for every contract in a more automated fashion. With the advancement in AI lends itself to be a perfect source for perfect use case for contract updates rather than contract renewal. And finally, the exchange declaration. Many of these things from a declaration perspective are again primed for using AI and advanced analytics in AI to provide those declarations on a more timely, accurate basis. Then if we move forward, the final thing that we looked at is from the order fulfillment point of view is what is it that we can do on the order fulfillment side, specifically around the data notification. We parked that last simply because of advances in complexity that it poses across different customers and across different customer relationships and what they do within their specific area. I'm going to pause here to see how does this land with you, Trip. Keen to hear your reactions before I move forward.
And then the order fulfillment part, is it goes left to right for a reason, right? So the demand management comes in and you're updating inventory, and from a workflow perspective, it can go left to right. Some people experience it differently, but in terms of the commercial, it goes left to right. But in terms of coming across and adding value to the process, it goes right to left, right? So, and what's interesting, one of the reflections I had in the invoice processing side is when you start to think about a couple slides ago, Deepak had something about the value in trying to figure out, what your current cost is. There are so many people that tend to not be in the market data team, but you impact as a result of this kind of transformation, right? So think about the finance person that's got that spreadsheet of prepaids that doesn't have to do that anymore because you can provide that information to them directly, right? The person that's checking on invoice, but they don't have an inventory to reconcile it against, but they struggle and they're working on some offline thing because they don't understand optimized spend, right? That kind of, or their inventory system in general, right? So and the conversations and drama that can happen on exchange declarations when it's not being done properly and when you're being reactive to audits, right? Or the work that goes into contract renewals when you're being reactive and not proactive. So just by having the right dates in there and just by having the right connections and services into that contract and the records, is to be able to say, hey, I know this renewal is coming up in 3 months. I need to start working on it now because I have to notify them in 2 months that we want to either keep or cancel, right? So if you're not staying ahead of that and not understanding within that 60-day period, all of a sudden it's very tight. And to build yourself that room to do the proper evaluation, you're going to be caught behind and you're going to waste money. Money will just flow out, right? And in this way, by going right to left in terms of the way that the migration goes and following the left to right from your process, this allows you to stay proactive in all these different areas, right? And to make the most of your spend and for your team to play the most strategic role possible.
Yeah, no, it completely makes sense. And I think that I just noticed a question from Matt. Under invoice processing, what's meant by data transformation? This is the ability for us to take a PDF invoice, extract key value pairs out of it, translate it into systemic structured machine data for us then to upload into optimize spend for the purposes of doing a reconciliation and further invoice processing. I hope that answers your question, Matt. Happy to take any further questions that you may have in chat, and then subsequently once we open up the Q&A. Now that we are in this slide, perhaps Shay, it would be great if you can push in your second poll. And the second poll is more catered towards, now that you've heard the story, there seems to be a high level blueprint in terms of the areas to attack and what gains you could have. What's stopping you from doing it is all that we wanted to hear. So feel free to add.
I'm going to be interested to see what comes back on that. I'm going to also weigh in on the invoice data transformation piece where this is a game changer. Where the description on the invoice of a service doesn't necessarily match what the vendor has in their contract. And also it's not what's known by the business community. This can all be triangulated through this technology. That's what data transformation means. So that through and through, you know what the service is all the way through, even though it's being called different things, different places. So it's a big change. So anyway, so we're gonna see what kind of responses we get for the hurdles, because it's not, it's not as hard as it needs to be. There are hurdles, but the business case is clear. In terms of I think all of these hurdles are not that big hurdles because, but we'll see what the results come back, and I want to talk about it.
And if you are a betting man, Trip,
thank you for asking that, your question.
Yeah. And
So if you're
Trip, so sorry, Deepak, I'm just gonna let this run a little bit longer. We've got 10 respondents. I'm guessing people are having to noodle through which is the biggest hurdle. So I'll give it just another minute or so we get to a little bit larger sampling, and then I'll publish the results, okay?
Right, and not everyone's not allowed to answer all four. Come on. Be a little selective. Maybe give your top two, right? And then or top three, and see how this comes out.
So here is my question. While we let this run for a little longer, right? So if you were a betting, what do you think is the biggest hurdle that our participants are gonna pick out?
Well, I think it's going to be the fourth one. I think I don't know that it's true. I'm just saying that it, it's a little scary in terms of the time, because remember I said, do more with less, but to get to the place where you're there, what kind of effort does it take to get there? And I'm going to make you answer the question, what does it take to get there? Because, Deepak, how do you make it easy to get there, right? Is really the question. Because, but it, everything takes a little investment, right? A little time, right? Because it's about handing things over or whatever the transformation is. But it's worth getting over that little hump for the leap you get out of it later. So anyway, so that's my thought. I think that's would be the biggest one. Maybe the panel, the folks will prove me wrong. Maybe, who knows?
No, I concur with you, to be honest, right? So for me, it's one or four, I think, is where most of the participants are going to say, "Oh, wow."
Well, okay, all right.
Okay.
So I think competing priorities might be the same. Maybe we should have had a better question, right? Competing priorities and lack of internal resources might be similar, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
I was nearly there. I missed that too, but my suspicion was always on one or four. Okay, fantastic.
And I think budget constraints, when we start talking about ROI and so forth, it may be like, I don't have it in my market data budget, but when you start thinking about like what time you're spending doing things that you should be doing better, doing more strategically, or the impact of what I do, and through this transformation, it's not just what happens on the market data team, it's what happens throughout the organization. All of a sudden, the business lines are getting more data. They're be able to make more effective decisions and help you negotiate better. It's not just I've got 5 people on my market data team doing this work. I've got 100 people throughout my organization that are going to make their jobs a little easier throughout. So, and that's a message we're hearing all the time, and we see it all the time as we're engaging with folks. So, but I do, I respect the nine answers on that one, because it's a real thing. You have a budget, we have to figure it out, right? And you have to make a case. There's nothing that gets done without a business case. So, fair point. What do you think, Deepak?
No, 100%. And I think this pretty much is in line with what we are hearing across the globe in terms of previous interactions as well, is like the budget constraints, the competing priorities, and probably I think in one of those extreme examples, one of our customers came and told us that they felt market data was one of those orphan childs when it comes to transformation that the bank's thinking of, because the kind of I think the sentiment that was voiced over by the specific customer was, if it was a payment system, if it was a If it was another banking critical system, there is billions of dollars that go in from a transformation and technology upkeep perspective. Whereas when it comes to market data, it feels like, yeah, okay, that can wait. Hang on, it's fine. Just show me the value of what you do. It will come. It will come. You're not in our priority list right now, but we will get you there over the next 18 months time frame. So everything seems to be an 18-month kick the can down the road when it comes to market data, right?
For a very, very high expense line.
For a very, very high expense line. Okay. So finally, last but not the least, I'm cognizant of the time as well. That I think, Shay, you had plans to have a Q&A session as well, right? So last but not the least, I think the long and short of the story is, focus on invoice processing and inventory management collectively will help you unlock the capacity that you are today spending on highly manual, repetitive, time-consuming tasks. Once you get rid of it, either by means of DIY or thinking about a partner who's got capability and capacity to do this for you and help you realize time to value quickly, you would have capacity to focus on delivering increased business value for your organization, things that only you as market data manager can do, i.e., can I provide a different feed for LNG that gives the same result to my business and that costs half the price of what I pay with S&P is a decision only you can make. And if you have the time and the capacity to make the decision, then you're adding value to the business. I'm going to pause here to get your thoughts in as well, Trip, and we go to questions after.
Well, you have to pay your invoices. This is non-negotiable, right? Question is, are you just going to pay them or are they going to be correct? Are you going to push back on the vendor when they get it wrong? Right? So it doesn't match the contract. Is it what you agreed to? You don't know that unless you've got an inventory in place that you can reconcile against. If you've got an inventory, which is also a non-negotiable because you can't negotiate a contract unless you know what you're spending and who's drinking on your bar tab, so to speak, right? Which business lines are consuming what, right? Those are non-negotiable things. The integration with finance, making sure that things are smooth, not spending time on that, right? You have to have order fulfillment. The business lines are always going to need stuff, right? But do you have enough information on the left of this to be able to provide them with the information they need to make a good decision on what they're going to get? How much does this thing cost? What if I add 5 more users? What if I've got summer interns, right? So you need all the information on the left to get there. And then that third quadrant, your contracts are in there as well, right? So that's, am I under contract? And do I have a spare I can use instead of buying new, right? Someone leaves the firm. Oh, what happens to their terminal? Can we, or whatever, can I cancel it right away? Do I have to wait? Has someone been waiting for it? So all these things are you have to do these things. These are non-negotiable, right? So the question is, how do I make the most of that? How do I make it easy? And how do I not spend all my time doing that stuff when I have strategic things to do, right? And it all flows to the right because I want my market data team focused on getting more value out of the business, working with those business lines, getting the most out of my negotiations with vendors, decreasing any drama from those interactions, whether it's an exchange or vendor, right? So, or business line, right? To make sure that when a business line comes to me saying I need something, my answers are quick and clear and crisp and accurate, and I'm not distracted by all the stuff to the left. But I've got all the information that comes out of that whole process. So anyway, off my soapbox, but I'm only a little passionate about it. But there's only one way to get there.
No, thanks for that. Great interaction. We both are happy to take any questions that you may have. And Shay, guide us through how we do this.
Sorry, I had a little bit of a lag. I missed the question, Deepak.
How should they ask their questions, Shay?
Oh, gotcha. You can post, there's a Q&A function. I believe it's on the bottom tray for attendees. for any reason you don't see that, I think you can put it in the chat if you're comfortable, but you should have a Q&A function visible. And we'll just need to be sure to read out the questions if they come in through the Q&A panel, because I believe not everyone can see that.
Got it. Okay. While we wait for questions to come through, Chip, I thought you had a question for me, or maybe I'm
I've got a lot
mistaken.
of questions for you, Deepak. Well, I guess one of the one of the questions I always ask is yeah, what is it like? You know, what are kind of things that you do to make that move easy, right? When someone wants to get help with some of these things. How is
Yeah.
your team
Okay.
empowered to do that?
Okay. Without sounding like a salesperson, right? And cognizant of that is our managed services helps you do that, right? We have a fully fleshed out managed services that takes away your current pains with invoice processing and inventory management and delivers it to you as a service, as an outcome, as a service that delivers outcome for you, right? And the reason why you want to look at it is us or any other partner for that reason is because time to value, right? If you embark on this journey to do this, it is anywhere between 3 to 6 months, right? Before
Right.
you realize any sort of savings that's going to come out, whether it's an FTE reduction or your capacity unlock, it is 3 to 6 months gone. Using a provider like us, you have access to it right from month one because it's nailed in, it's honed in, you're doing it, you just turn the tap, get on, move on, unlock capacity, focus on other things, right? And then the other thing is while we are looking at it from a narrow point of view of invoice processing, inventory, order fulfillment, demand management, exchange declarations, you might also want to keep in mind that there is a wider ecosystem outside of these activities that we talked about that can be brought to play, such as we have a tool called Xmon that helps you with all of the usage and spend around your terminals, right, and other things, right? All of those things are an ecosystem that can add into your understanding of your current spend and usage that then helps you unlock the actual value that you can drive for your business. I hope that
I'd
answered
add
your
something to
question.
that, Deepak, as well. I'd add something to that because, um, um, it's one thing to just move a process, right? It's another to move it to best practice, right? And so a lot of the work that goes on when we move things or take these kinds of things on is we evaluate and we go, okay, hold on a second, what's going on right now? What is the inventory current state, right? For a new client, it tends to be more intensive. For existing clients, there's still stuff to do, right? Just because are there, orphan platforms? Do we have run rate without invoices? Do we have invoices without run rate? Are the contracts aligned and how are the allocations and so forth? Are they off best practice? They think they're doing it one way, but we have an opportunity to maybe have a conversation. So there's a whole nice alignment thing that happens because at the end of the day, everyone wants it to be as efficient as possible. And it's a nice cleansing. It's a very cleansing sort of process as well that gets to that best practice. So anyway, I just sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to weigh in on that.
No, I think that's quite valuable, and that's a good segue into looking at if we have any additional questions or not. Then, Shay, where do you want us to go from here?
Well, certainly I would say if anything occurs to you, I don't see any other questions in either of the Q&A or the chat, but certainly if anything occurs to you as an attendee after the fact, certainly reach out to us. We're happy to answer your questions. So I think, I think at this point, unless nobody has any late breaking questions, I think we can consider that a wrap. And we certainly appreciate all of you taking time to join today. And Trip, Deepak, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I know we have a lot of fun as a team. I have to admit, though, every time I like to tease you, but every time we talk, I learned something new from you, and I learned something new in these webinars, and I'm sure our attendees can say the same. So if you would, sorry, just a reminder, we will send an email after the fact with a recording. And I have to say, I think I might have missed bringing the results of that second survey on screen. If so, I apologize. I will be sure to include that in the follow-up email for you so you can see the results. And if you would just stick around, we have a super short survey that will pop on screen at the end. And again, we really do, if you would take a moment to answer those questions, we do scour those results, and we do use them to inform future webinars. The other thing I would say is we certainly have more webinars lined up for the rest of the year. So keep an eye out for those, and we hope you'll join some of those as well. So thanks everyone for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at a future event, either in person or virtual. Take care.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.